In the heart of Kenya's Masai Mara, one small life teetered on the edge of death. A lion cub trapped in a deadly swamp, a mother frantic with fear, and a man willing to risk everything. What happened next would change the way we see the wild forever. Stay with me as we witness this incredible rescue. Don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and follow to explore more amazing wildlife stories. The first light of dawn broke hesitantly over the Masai Mara, spilling amber across the tall grass and mudflats that had become a patchwork of survival and danger. Matt Daniels adjusted his binoculars, feeling the cool morning air fill his lungs as he scanned the edges of the drying watering hole. The drought had been relentless, leaving the earth cracked and treacherous in places, and Matt knew that every step a creature took here was a delicate negotiation between life and death. At 34, he had spent nearly a decade capturing the raw beauty of Africa's big cats, but even his experience did little to prepare him for the unpredictability of this morning. Kamani, his guide, sat quietly in the shade of their Land Rover, letting Matt work undisturbed. Over the past 3 weeks, their partnership had become a rhythm, a silent understanding of patience, timing, and respect. Kimani's encyclopedic knowledge of local wildlife complemented Matt's artistic eye, and together they had navigated countless encounters, mostly distant, safe, and controlled. Yet this morning carried a tension that neither had expected. "Movement at 2 o'clock, Matt whispered, pressing the radio button. His heart thumped in his chest as his gaze followed the tall grass, catching the glint of tawny fur just at the edge of the clearing. The lioness appeared cautiously, a figure of strength and elegance, her shoulders rolling beneath a sleek coat that glistened faintly in the early sun. Matt's fingers adjusted the camera with instinctive precision, the telephoto lens bringing every detail of her movement into sharp focus. Kamani's voice crackled back over the radio. "Koboko Pride," he said softly. "They hunted here yesterday. Be careful. She may be leading something." Matt nodded, though he didn't need to. He had been watching the waterhole for hours, and instinct told him this wasn't a casual visit. The lioness moved deliberately, eyes scanning the horizon as though calculating risks, until she reached the edge of the muddy bank. Then her stride faltered, and something in her posture changed. Her tail flicked sharply, her head dipped, and low growls escaped her throat. Matt squinted through the lens, heart tightening. Initially, there was nothing but the uneven mud, a mix of thick swamp and shallow water. Then he saw it, a small, desperate movement, a tiny body struggling to escape the mud's firm grip. A lion cub, no more than 3 months old, sinking slowly, its tiny head barely above the sludge. "Kamani," Matt's voice came out tense over the radio. "There's a cub trapped. The mother can't reach it." Kamani's eyes widened behind the binoculars, his face tightening. "Very dangerous," he warned. "She won't let anyone near her cub. You should not—" "I can't just watch it die," Matt interrupted, already moving back toward the Land Rover. "We can use the winch cable." "The mud is too soft," Kimani replied firmly. "The cable will sink. Matt ignored him, feeling the primal instinct rise in his chest. Professional caution had fled. The cub's helpless struggles stirred something deeper, something immediate and undeniable. "Then I'll go myself." Kamani's hand gripped his arm. "Matt, no, this is not our place to interfere. Nature." "This isn't natural," Matt said, gesturing toward the lethal mud trap. "The drought made this worse. In a normal season, that cub wouldn't be stuck." A long moment passed as Kamani studied him. Finally, he nodded. "I will distract the mother. You will have 2 minutes, no more." They devised a plan quickly, the kind born of urgency rather than careful calculation. Kimani would use the Land Rover to divert the lioness, honking and maneuvering along the opposite edge of the waterhole home, keeping her attention away from the cub. Matt would approach from the firmest path, using a long wooden board to distribute his weight across the unstable mud. Matt stripped off his heavier clothing, keeping only his boots. He picked up a long pole that could serve as both support and defensive tool. Every step toward the cub was measured, deliberate. He was acutely aware that one wrong move could bury him in the mud, leaving the cub beyond hope. Safety protocols and reserve regulations blurred into irrelevance as adrenaline surged, overriding reason. "Ready?" Kimani asked, hand on the ignition. Matt nodded. The Land Rover's engine roared to life, and Kamani began a rhythmic honking pattern. The plan worked immediately. The Lioness pivoted toward the vehicle, caution battling maternal instinct in her amber eyes. She paced between the cub and the Land Rover, growls low and uncertain. Matt dropped to all fours, placing the wooden board under his chest and knees. Every inch forward was a negotiation with the mud, the board sinking slightly before finding purchase on firmer layers beneath the surface. 10 feet out, the cub's small body appeared more exhausted than before, fur matted with drying mud, eyes wide with panic. "Almost there," Matt murmured. His voice carried instinctively, though he knew the cub would interpret it as threat, not reassurance. 8 feet from shore, the board tilted dangerously and Matt froze, redistributing his weight with painstaking precision. 6 feet, the cub's struggles slowing, strength fading. The agreed-upon horn signal from Kamani cut through the morning air, warning him that time was almost up. 4 feet from shore, the cub made one final attempt to wriggle free. 3 feet, Matt stretched the pole forward. 2 feet, desperation taking over, he abandoned the pole and reached with his bare hand, fingers closing on the loose skin at the back of the cub's neck, the same way a mother would carry her offspring. With a guttural, tense pull, the cub came free. Matt clutched the small body to his chest and began the arduous retreat. Every step back was more challenging than the advance. Mud tugged at his legs, weight shifted unpredictably, and the cub, exhausted and frightened, offered only weak resistance. 5 feet from shore, the Land Rover's horn blared again. The Lioness, now fully aware, began charging. 30 yards away, she moved like a coiled spring, every muscle alive, every instinct honed for protection. Matt's heart raced, every rational thought drowned by the roar of adrenaline. He reached the firmer ground, collapsed to his knees, and gently placed the cub on solid earth. The Lioness stopped, sniffed, growled softly, and then did something entirely unexpected. She began to lick the cub, cleaning the mud from its fur. Her attention was entirely on the offspring, ignoring the human presence. Matt froze, disbelief and relief washing over him, every muscle trembling from exhaustion and emotion. Kimani's voice was a whisper beside him. "Do not move. She's not attacking." Time slowed as Matt watched the mother lioness care for her cub, her posture cautious but far from aggressive. Slowly she lifted the cub by the scruff, carrying it safely to the edge of the acacia grove where the pride had taken refuge. Matt and Kamani followed at a careful distance, witnessing the return of life to the little cub. For Matt, the moment was overwhelming, a mix of relief, awe, and an unsettling shift in his understanding of these magnificent predators. The line between human and wild animals seemed less distinct, blurred by instinct, courage, and recognition. Through the lens, he could see the pride settle, cubs tumbling in the soft grass, adults lounging with untroubled eyes. The rescued cub, still speckled with traces of mud, nestled among its siblings. Matt allowed himself a long, shuddering breath. This was not the photograph he had come for, but it was far more profound. The mud seemed to resist every movement, its sticky grip pulling at Matt's boots and fingers, threatening to undo every careful step he had taken. He balanced on the wooden board, sliding it forward cautiously, each inch a negotiation with gravity and instinct. The cub was small, its body trembling violently with exhaustion, the golden fur beneath the mud barely visible. Every minute that passed, Matt felt the invisible clock tick louder, reminding him that the lioness's attention would not remain diverted indefinitely. Kamani's horn cut through the morning stillness. 3 short honks, 1 long, a warning signal. The lioness might be reconsidering her distraction. Matt forced himself to focus, pushing aside fear. Each breath was shallow, calculated. Panic could sink him faster than the mud ever could. He moved closer, hands braced on the board, eyes locked on the quivering cub. 8 feet from the edge, the cub's small head lifted briefly, eyes wide with terror. Matt whispered encouragements that he knew would be meaningless to the animal, but the act steadied his own trembling hands. The pole extended forward, yet the cub, driven by instinct, snapped weakly at empty air, incapable of recognizing help when it was so desperately close. Suddenly, the board tilted sharply under Matt's weight, threatening to pitch him forward into the viscous trap. He froze, muscles taut, heart hammering. For a moment, he considered retreating, but the cub's weakening cries spurred him on. Redistributing his weight carefully, he inched forward again. 6 feet from the shore, he could smell the mud, bitter and thick, clinging to his clothes. And yet the cub's fragile life drew him inexorably onward. The horns sounded again, long, urgent. The lioness had begun to pivot, reassessing the threat, her amber eyes flicking toward Matt. Adrenaline surged through him, mingling with fear in a sharp, undeniable taste. He made a snap decision. The pole would not suffice. Reaching out with his bare hand, he grasped the loose skin at the nape of the cub's neck, the same spot a mother lion would use to carry her young. For a tense heartbeat, it seemed the mud had claimed the cub, refusing to relinquish its tiny prisoner. Then, with a wet, sucking pull, the cub came free. Matt held it tightly against his chest, feeling the small heartbeat, rapid and irregular, but alive. Its body, dense with undeveloped muscle, weighed more than he had expected. Each motion threatened to destabilize his precarious footing, the mud tugging greedily at his knees and boots. He began retreating inch by careful inch, muscles screaming with effort. The cub's tiny claws scraped weakly against his chest, instinctively seeking purchase, though it lacked the strength to resist him. Matt's vision narrowed, every sound reduced to a dull awareness. The hiss of mud, the croak of distant birds, the distant roar of the Land Rover engine. Then he heard it, the low, rolling growl that set his heart into a panic. The lioness had realized the deception. She moved faster than he anticipated, covering the distance to the edge of the mud flat in terrifying strides, powerful limbs flexing with every bound. Matt's mind raced. There was no time for caution, no path back to the vehicle and safety. Survival instincts took over. 5 feet from solid ground, the cub still clutched to his chest. Matt abandoned the wooden board entirely, lunging across the final stretch. The mud tugged violently at his body, as if aware of the precious cargo he carried. With one last desperate push, he threw himself onto firmer ground. Rolling onto his side, he pressed the cub against him protectively, chest heaving, mud smeared across his face and arms. He dared a glance upward. The lioness skidded to a stop a few yards away, amber eyes locked on him, hackles raised. A roar rolled across the air, deafening in its intensity, vibrating through the savanna and into Matt's chest. Every fiber of his being tensed, expecting the final impact, the crushing force of predator strength. But it never came. Instead, something unexpected occurred. The lioness approached the cub, sniffing and licking, her body tense but no longer aggressive toward him. The roar had faded into a low, wary murmur. The cub, too exhausted to protest, allowed itself to be cleaned and inspected. Matt remained frozen, chest heaving, mud caked to his skin, every nerve alight with disbelief and relief. Kamani's voice, a whisper at his side, reminded him to stay still. "She's not attacking," he said wide-eyed. "Do not move." Matt's mind struggled to reconcile what he was seeing. For a moment, he had expected the worst, a moment of inevitability that would claim him for a life spent observing wild predators. Yet the mother lion's focus was singular. Her cub. She licked its fur with care, nudging it gently, repositioning it so that it could stand, all while keeping an eye on him without showing aggression. Minutes passed like hours as he watched her work. Each movement was deliberate, controlled, a combination of instinct and intelligence that Matt had never fully appreciated until now. Slowly the cub responded, wobbling on its legs, trembling but alive, a testament to both resilience and maternal instinct. Finally, the lioness lifted the cub by the scruff, carrying it away from the treacherous mud. Matt and Kamani followed at a careful distance, their movements deliberate, cautious, blending into the background. The cub, though still mud-caked, showed signs of vitality, weakly pawing at the air as its mother guided it to safety. Watching from a distance, Matt's thoughts swirled. This was more than a rescue. It was a revelation. The thin line he had always imagined between humans and wild animals, between observer and participant, blurred completely in that moment. The intelligence, recognition, and care exhibited by the lioness had challenged everything he thought he knew about predator behavior. Kamani glanced at him, reading the mix of awe and disbelief. Your actions, perhaps she recognized your spirit, he said quietly. You risked your life for her cub, and she spared yours in return. At least, that is what my grandfather would say. Matt allowed himself a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The cub, now settled beside its mother under the sparse shade of an acacia tree, began tentative movements, testing its legs and body for stability. The lioness Fama kept a watchful gaze on the surrounding area, but ignored the humans completely, her focus on the cub unwavering. The Land Rover, their only safe vantage point, seemed a distant promise of security. Matt allowed himself to step back slowly, eyes never leaving the lioness, aware that any sudden movement could undo the fragile equilibrium. When their backs finally met the vehicle, he let himself exhale fully, mud-covered and trembling. Kamani grasped his arm, pulling him inside the Land Rover's protective side. Get in, he whispered, urgency threaded through the calm. She sees you now. Do not provoke her. Matt sat back, chest heaving, staring at the mother and cub. They were safe, alive, and something profound had shifted within him. For the first time, he understood that observing wildlife was not just about capturing images. It was about witnessing intelligence, emotion, and connection in its rawest, most unpredictable form. Through the lens, even without a camera, he captured every detail. The cub's tentative steps, the mother's precise movements, the cautious acknowledgement of his presence. This was a story no photograph could fully contain, a tale that would forever change his understanding of what it meant to be a witness to life in the wild. As the adrenaline ebbed from Matt's veins, he felt the tremor of exhaustion settle deep into his muscles. The cub, safe now in the embrace of its mother, had brought him to the edge of human limitation and beyond. He sat back in the Land Rover, mud-covered, chest heaving, staring at the pride as they adjusted to the morning light. The mother lioness, Fama, had returned her cub to the temporary den near the acacia grove, settling beside it while other members of the pride gathered nearby. The pride's calm acceptance of the cub's return struck Matt. Despite yesterday's chaos and the intrusion of humans into their immediate environment, they had not fled. Instead, they moved with calculated caution, a deliberate wariness that betrayed intelligence rather than fear. Matt's lens remained stowed. Capturing images now felt secondary to the raw experience before him. This was observation on a level far deeper than photography, a lesson in patience, humility, and the capacity for recognition across species. Kamani, usually unflappable, broke the silence first. I have never seen behavior like this, he admitted quietly. His Swahili-accented English carried the weight of decades spent in these lands. She did not attack, not when she could have. She focused only on her cub, even while seeing you so close. Matt nodded, the words recognition and trust forming slowly in his mind. Could it be that the lioness had understood his intent? Could she perceive that he had risked everything for the life of her cub? Rationally, it seemed impossible. Scientifically, such cognition was rarely documented. Yet every detail, the timing, the lack of aggression, the deliberate care with which she handled the cub, spoke of awareness beyond instinct. The sun climbed higher, painting the savanna in warm golds and soft shadows. Matt finally allowed himself to breathe fully, muscles unclenching. Kamani's hand rested on the door, steadying him. You should not have done this, he said, tone firm but reflective. The reserve authorities will not be pleased. Matt exhaled, thinking back over the decision. The protocols were clear. Human interference with wildlife was forbidden. Yet, as he had watched the cub struggle, it had become impossible to adhere to those rules. Nature, he realized, was not always fair, and the drought had created conditions that no animal could have anticipated. To do nothing would have been an abandonment of responsibility. Not a professional failure, but a human one. The two men remained in the Land Rover for a long while, observing from a safe distance. Fama groomed the cub, nudging it gently with her muzzle, her eyes occasionally scanning the surroundings with alert intelligence. The cub's small body, though exhausted and coated in dried mud, responded with tentative movements, testing its strength against the soft grass beneath it. Matt's chest swelled with relief and awe. He had witnessed not just a rescue, but the profound complexity of predator behavior. The bond between mother and child, the decision-making capacity of a wild lion, the subtle recognition of human intent. As the pride began to settle more comfortably, Matt reflected on his own experience. For years, he had observed animals through the lens, recording their lives without truly participating. The camera had always provided a barrier, a way to distance himself emotionally while still capturing the story. But yesterday, and this morning, that barrier had shattered. He had been part of the narrative, directly influencing the outcome of another life. The weight of that responsibility, mixed with the relief of success, left him introspective. Kamani broke the silence again, softer this time. Your grandfather used to say that wild animals sense the spirit of humans. Perhaps she understood that you acted with pure intention. Matt considered this, feeling the odd comfort of the idea. He had no scientific proof, no documentation that could validate such a thought, but it resonated with the truth of what he had experienced. Recognition need not be verbal, it could be felt, observed, acknowledged in subtle ways. Matt's gaze lingered on the cub, now standing on wobbly legs, taking small, uncertain steps toward its siblings. Its tiny body shimmered with renewed vitality, and the mother lioness guided it gently, pressing against it with reassurance, nudging it to stand taller, move with purpose. This display of care, unwavering even in the presence of a potential threat, was a lesson in courage and maternal instinct, as raw and unfiltered as anything Matt had ever captured on film. Later, back at the research camp, Matt and Kamani reported the incident to the Masai Mara Reserve authorities. There was acknowledgement of the danger posed by the drought's effect on the mudflats, but also stern warnings about violating the policy against human interference with wildlife. Matt listened quietly, understanding the necessity of rules while reflecting on the moral complexity of the situation. He had acted out of instinct, empathy, and the refusal to stand by while a life slipped away. That evening, Matt returned to his tent, muscles aching and heart heavy with contemplation. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by images of the cub, the desperate struggle, and the striking composure of the mother. Questions swirled. Why had Fama not attacked? How had she reconciled the presence of a human so close to her vulnerable offspring? Could it be that in risking his life, Matt had earned a form of acknowledgement that transcended species boundaries? The following morning, Matt awoke before dawn, the sky tinged with pink and violet. He joined Kimani for coffee, their routine unchanged but their minds irrevocably altered by the events of the previous day. I want to go back, Matt said quietly, staring at the horizon. I need to see how the cub is doing. Kimani's expression was guarded. The reserve will not approve, he said. We must maintain distance this time. Observation only. Matt nodded, understanding the balance required, respect for both protocol and the animal's natural space. They set off toward the acacia grove where the pride had taken temporary refuge. Matt adjusted his camera, ready to observe from afar. Through the telephoto lens, the scene unfolded. The cub he had rescued, now distinguishable by patches of dried mud clinging stubbornly to its fur, tumbled in play with its siblings. The mother lioness, alert but calm, oversaw the interactions, guiding and correcting as needed. Relief and satisfaction mingled in Matt's chest. The cub was thriving, resilient, unharmed by yesterday's ordeal, beyond the temporary discomfort of mud and exhaustion. Matt's professional instincts reasserted themselves, capturing images that told a story not just of survival, but of intelligence, empathy, and connection. Each photograph, each moment through the lens, reinforced a profound realization. The boundary between observer and participant, between human and predator, had become permeable, defined not by species, but by respect, action, and understanding. Kimani spoke softly beside him. The pride remained close to the watering hole, despite yesterday's events. Unusual behavior. Usually they would relocate after an encounter like this. Matt nodded, considering the implications. The cub's life had been preserved, Wes, but more than that, the pride's continued presence indicated a remarkable tolerance, a subtle acknowledgement of human intent and perhaps even gratitude. Observation alone had become a lesson in humility, demonstrating that wildlife could teach as much through behavior and choice as through survival. The morning wore on. The cub played, exploring the small clearing under the watchful eyes of its mother and the adult females. Matt watched, reflecting on the extraordinary nature of the events. A rescue born from empathy, an animal's recognition of that risk, and the quiet bond that had formed in the crucible of danger. Here in the heart of the Masai Mara, he had witnessed a connection that defied conventional understanding, a fleeting but indelible moment where human intention and animal cognition intersected. Through careful observation, Matt realized the depth of what had occurred. Not only had he intervened in a moment of crisis, but he had also been recognized, not as predator, not as intruder, but as a being capable of empathy. The cub's survival was a testament to courage and action, and the lioness's response was a revelation, expanding the boundaries of understanding between species. In these moments, Matt understood the delicate interplay of trust, respect, and recognition that defined life in the wild, leaving him profoundly changed. The Kiboko pride's behavior over the next several days began to draw Matt's attention in ways that went far beyond ordinary observation. Each morning, he and Kimani positioned themselves at a discreet distance, careful not to interfere, yet documenting every motion with a rigor born from both professionalism and fascination. The rescued cub, now nicknamed Margie, showed remarkable resilience, darting among siblings with a playful confidence that seemed to defy its recent ordeal. Matt noticed subtle behaviors from Fama, the mother lioness, that suggested awareness of his presence, even from several hundred feet away. On multiple occasions, she appeared to adjust her position relative to the Land Rover, allowing unobstructed views of the cub's interactions. At first, he attributed this to coincidence, the predator's keen attention to its surroundings. But patterns emerged, a deliberate orientation toward his vehicle during play, a cautious yet unflustered inspection of human activity at the water's edge, a consistent return to areas that optimize photographic vantage points. It became impossible to dismiss the idea that she recognized him, not merely as another observer, but as the one who had risked himself for her cub. One morning, a team of reserve rangers arrived at the watering hole, implementing a temporary safety measure to prevent other wildlife from becoming trapped in the treacherous mudflats. Matt set up his camera, intent on documenting the lioness's response. The entire pride paused as the rangers approached, heads lifting in unison, eyes tracking the human's movement. Fama separated from the group and walked directly toward them. The rangers froze instinctively, hands moving to the tranquilizer guns they carried. Matt, though tense, held the camera steady, framing the scene with a sense of inevitability. He was about to witness a confrontation that could redefine understanding of predator behavior. Yet the encounter unfolded differently than anyone could have anticipated. Fama approached deliberately, with no crouched posture, no predatory glare. Her movement was measured, almost contemplative, and her gaze fixed, not on the humans generally, but on Matt specifically. She paused at a safe distance, sitting briefly on her hunches, amber eyes surveying the humans and then returning to him. The tension stretched, almost unbearably, for a full minute. Then, as if making a conscious decision, she turned, returned to her cub, and led the pride along a path that avoided the mud, keeping both the humans and her offspring safe. The footage Matt captured was remarkable, unlike anything he had ever documented. The deliberate recognition, the choice to navigate a hazardous situation with both maternal and situational intelligence, challenged every conventional assumption about lion behavior. When Dr. Helena Wosu, the lead wildlife biologist at the reserve, reviewed the footage, she expressed both amazement and caution. "This contradicts much of what we know," she said carefully. "Recognition at this level, decision-making in the presence of humans, unprecedented." Kimani, standing beside Matt, insisted she recognized him, the man who saved her cub. Dr. Wosu remained skeptical. "We must be cautious about anthropomorphizing," she warned. "There may be alternative explanations, curiosity about the human presence, attention to the construction at the waterhole. The lioness may not be recognizing him specifically." Matt interrupted softly but firmly, pointing to a sequence of frames that showed Fama's gaze lingering on him in a manner consistent with the day of the rescue. "The same way she did yesterday," he said. "There is acknowledgement there." The following weeks were devoted to detailed observation and documentation. Matt extended his stay, now collaborating with Dr. Wosu and her research team. Every movement of the pride, particularly the interactions of Margie, became part of an ongoing study. Patterns emerged. Fama adjusted her patrols near the Land Rover sphere, positioning the cub for optimal observation without compromising its safety. Other members of the pride maintained natural behavior, yet the subtle signs of recognition repeated, reinforcing the idea that something extraordinary had occurred. National Geographic became involved, providing a platform for both photographs and video footage. Matt's documentation of the rescue and its aftermath was featured in a special article, sparking widespread discussion in the scientific community. The narrative challenged long-held assumptions about predator cognition, sparking debate about the potential for cross-species recognition. Scholars weighed the evidence carefully, discussing possible explanations ranging from scent recognition to advanced cognitive mapping and social awareness. The human implications were equally profound for Matt. For the first time in his career, the act of observation and documentation was inseparable from the moral and ethical dimensions of engagement. He realized that wildlife photography was more than capturing beauty. It was a form of communication, a bridge between species, a testimony to intelligence and empathy that transcended scientific explanation. During long afternoons of observation, Matt began to notice further subtle behaviors. Margie, now more robust and playful, frequently approached the edge of the acacia grove, always ensuring Fama's proximity. Fama, in turn, monitored the Land Rover's position carefully, even when the humans were quiet and unobtrusive. Other researchers noted the consistency, repeated awareness of Matt's presence without aggression, guided facilitation of observation, and subtle positioning of the cub and pride for minimal risk. The phenomenon was documented meticulously. Every detail, the timing of gaze, the direction of movement, the behavior of cubs and adults in relation to human presence, was logged and analyzed. Hypotheses were proposed, tested against behavior from prior studies, and revised. The data suggested that lions were capable of higher-order cognition than previously believed, capable of recognition not merely of scent or sound, but of human intent and action. Matt's relationship with the pride evolved subtly but unmistakably. He observed them not as distant subjects, but as sentient participants in a dynamic ecosystem, individuals capable of memory, recognition, and nuanced response. Fama's behavior particularly became a case study in maternal intelligence, adaptability, and the potential for interspecies acknowledgement. Despite the academic focus, the emotional impact remained vivid. Each day in the field reinforced the fragility and resilience of life in the savannah. Matt found himself humbled by the trust extended by Fama, the responsibility of observing without interference, and the rare glimpse into an intelligence that rivaled human moral decision-making in its complexity. Weeks passed, and the article in National Geographic, titled "The Lion's Recognition: Rethinking Predator Cognition," was published, accompanied by photographs and video sequences that had been painstakingly captured. The story resonated globally, inspiring discussions not only about conservation and animal cognition, but also about empathy, courage, and the moral choices humans make in the wild. Matt continued to observe the pride, meticulously documenting interactions, behavioral patterns, and Margie's development. His photographs became invaluable to researchers, contributing to papers that explored predator intelligence, maternal behavior, and the possibility of recognition beyond instinct. Yet for Matt, the deeper significance remained personal. The understanding that his actions, born of instinct and compassion, had been witnessed, understood, and in a sense acknowledged by a creature whose intelligence he had long admired but never fully comprehended. Even as the scientific papers framed the findings with caution, using measured language to avoid overinterpretation, the footage spoke for itself. The cub's rescue, Fama's maternal awareness, and her deliberate navigation around humans demonstrated a rare intersection of cognition, emotion, and instinct. In witnessing this, Matt felt a profound shift, a connection across species, a recognition that intelligence and empathy were not solely human traits, and that the boundaries between observer and participant could be traversed in moments of necessity, courage, and care. By the end of his extended stay, Matt had amassed a record not only of wildlife behavior, but of an extraordinary human-animal interaction. The story of Margie, Fama, and the rescue became emblematic of the possibilities of understanding and connection, a testament to the extraordinary outcomes that arise when human courage and animal intelligence intersect in the wild. 6 months had passed since the rescue, and the Masai Mara had undergone a transformation. The seasonal rains had returned, bringing life back to the savanna in bursts of green across the golden plains. The watering hole that had once been a deadly trap was now surrounded by lush vegetation, teeming with wildlife taking advantage of the replenished resources. Matt Daniels stood on a gentle rise, camera in hand, observing the familiar landscape that had become both his workplace and a crucible of profound human experience. The Koboko pride, fully aware of the changes, adapted quickly. Cubs tumbled in the softened grass, their playful antics now demonstrating the first coordinated attempts at hunting and teamwork. Margie, the cub he had rescued months earlier, had grown stronger, his fur glossy, muscles lean yet powerful. Every leap and tumble revealed confidence, born from survival, play, and maternal guidance. Fama, ever vigilant, patrolled the edges of the clearing, periodically glancing toward the observation point where Matt had positioned himself. There was a tension in the air, an unspoken awareness that today would mark the end of his extended stay. Matt felt it keenly, the bittersweet mix of professional satisfaction and personal connection. 6 months of observation had yielded data, photographs, and footage that would challenge assumptions in the scientific community. Yet the intangible experience of witnessing a predator's recognition of human intent could not be fully captured by camera or paper. From the vantage point, Matt watched Margie approach the edge of a small pond. The cub paused, paws sinking slightly in the soft earth, and turned to look at his mother. Fama stepped forward, nuzzling him gently, her amber eyes reflecting vigilance and wisdom. Then, almost imperceptibly, her gaze shifted to the Land Rover in the distance. Amber eyes locked on him, and Matt felt the familiar recognition settle over him like a weight both profound and comforting. He lowered the camera, letting the moment exist without intervention. In that gaze, he understood the bond formed not through words or repeated human interaction, but through an act of courage, an acknowledgement of intent, and a shared understanding of survival and care. Fama's eyes conveyed awareness, a subtle but undeniable connection across species. Matt had glimpsed it before, but today, with the seasonal rains rejuvenating the land, it felt like a confirmation, a culmination of months of observation and mutual respect. As the pride moved through the clearing, leading the cubs into a game of practice hunting, Matt reflected on the journey. This had not been a story about capturing the perfect photograph or documenting routine wildlife behavior. It had been a story of crossing invisible boundaries, of witnessing intelligence, empathy, and maternal instinct on a scale few humans ever experienced. The rescue had been the catalyst, but the real revelation was the recognition, the silent acknowledgement between human and predator that had redefined his understanding of consciousness in the animal kingdom. Kimani joined him quietly, following the pride's progress with binoculars. "They are comfortable," he observed softly. "Even with us here, they show no fear, only awareness." Matt nodded, letting his thoughts settle. "It's more than comfort," he said. "It's recognition. I think Fama knows me, not as prey, not as a threat, but somehow she understands my role in Margie's life." The guide considered this carefully, shading his eyes against the rising sun. "It is unusual," he admitted. "Very few humans would ever witness such behavior. You are fortunate, Matt." Matt's mind replayed the events, the struggle in the mud, the rush to save Margie, the roar that had seemed destined to end in catastrophe, and the calm that followed when Fama focused entirely on her cub. Each moment had left an imprint, a profound lesson about courage, empathy, and the possibility of connection across species lines. The pride eventually returned to the grove of acacia trees near the waterhole. Fama carried Margie by the scruff one last time, repositioning him among siblings. Each cub, now robust and agile, explored the shade, paws swiping at insects and brushing against one another in playful sparring. The cohesion of the pride, the maternal vigilance, and the cubs' regained vitality spoke volumes about resilience, adaptability, and the instinctual intelligence that governed every decision. Matt allowed himself one final round of photographs, capturing the pride in their restored, natural rhythm. The camera, a tool he had relied on for years, now felt like an extension of his own perspective, documenting both science and the subtle poetry of life in the wild. Yet he knew that no lens could truly capture the recognition he had witnessed, the acknowledgement of intent, the trust born in a split-second life-or-death moment, and the enduring bond that had emerged from it. As the sun climbed higher, Matt and Kimani packed the Land Rover, preparing to leave the Masai Mara for the next assignment. The Pride, seemingly aware of their departure, did not retreat in fear. Instead, Fama glanced once more toward the observation point, amber eyes meeting Matt's, holding for a long, impossible-to-quantify moment. It was a farewell, a mutual acknowledgement of the roles each had played in the life of Margie and the subtle reshaping of boundaries that had taken place. Driving away, Matt felt the landscape shift beneath him, the flood of memories pressing against the present. Each hill, each clump of acacia, seemed etched with moments of tension, relief, and wonder. Margie's survival, Fama's intelligence, and the unspoken connection they had shared would remain with him forever. These experiences had redefined not only his professional perspective, but his personal understanding of the natural world. Back at the research camp, Matt assisted in final data logging and image curation, ensuring that every observation, every subtle behavior was recorded for posterity. Scientists would debate, analyze, and draw conclusions from the data, but the lived experience, the gravity of standing at the edge of life, witnessing a predator's recognition, was something no paper could capture fully. Later that evening, as dusk settled over the savannah, Matt looked out across the golden plains one last time. The Pride had returned to the safety of the grove, Margie nestled among his siblings, the mother vigilant yet calm. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the water, highlighting the delicate interplay between survival, recognition, and trust. In that moment, Matt understood the enormity of what had transpired. A boundary crossed, a life saved, and an unspoken bond forged that could never be undone. The journey had begun as a simple wildlife photography assignment, a task to document the behaviors of lions during the drought season. It had transformed into something far more profound, a testament to courage, empathy, and the astonishing intelligence of creatures often underestimated by human assumptions. Matt lowered his camera, knowing that no image could encapsulate the full depth of what he had witnessed. The intangible connection, the recognition that had passed between species in a moment of crisis, would remain etched in his memory forever. As the Land Rover carried him away from the Masai Mara, Matt felt a quiet contentment. He had left a mark, however small, on the life of Margie, and in return, he had been gifted a glimpse into the mind of Fama, a connection that defied explanation, a bridge between human and animal consciousness. Across the divide of species, language, and time, something profound had passed between them. Recognition, respect, and understanding had transcended instinct and fear, leaving behind a story that would endure far longer than the immediate memory of a rescue. Matt knew that the Masai Mara, the Pride, and the little cub he had saved had changed him irreversibly, instilling in him a reverence for life and intelligence that would guide every future encounter. And then, with a flick of her tail and a final glance toward him, Fama turned back to her Pride, disappearing into the tall grass, the savannah reclaiming her as it had always done. Matt lowered his camera one last time, exhaling a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The moment was over, but the lesson remained. Obedience and courage, empathy, and connection transcend species, circumstance, and fear. The Masai Mara had given him more than photographs. It had given him understanding. It had given him perspective. It had given him a story that would remain with him forever.